There is a difference between having a job and having a career. Like having a job is a moment in time, you're in, you're out, it's a little bit more transactional. A career is something you...
Hey, have you had this conversation? And we were like, yeah, I've had this conversation too. And we were like, but what would happen if you and I went head to head in an interview? And I said, well...
So if we were trying to create the ultimate team culture or the ultimate team engagement for us, and we were trying to dictate what that looked like, that would be a massive fail. Because...
And when it got announced in market, it was exciting, but it was also really nerve-wracking. And, you know, there were some headlines like the only way is down. Like, we remember that quite well because that hurt. And you think...
Welcome back to the second series of Unfiltered. This is the show where we celebrate the imperfect, the unvarnished, and the unashamedly raw journeys that shape our growth. We're bringing you dynamic duos who've propelled each other forward through thick and thin. This series is going to be bigger, bolder, and this time, thanks to our friends at the Marketing Academy, global. Welcome back to what is going to be a truly special episode of The Growth Distillery, where we are here presenting Unfiltered in partnership with the Marketing Academy for the second season. Now, leadership is hard. I mean, we've spent 2 years talking with you all about how hard that is. But shared leadership, truly shared leadership, that is a whole different level of choreography. I have the pleasure of being joined by Sian and Laura. They aren't just the co-CEOs of OMD. They are incredible proof that when it's done right, two minds can take the top job and operate as one, while delivering the impact of three. Now, it's not just about splitting the job. It's about syncing vision, navigating complexity in real time, and landing and leading with radical trust. So today we're going to explore not just what it takes to co-lead at scale, but the unseen alignment, the decision-making dance, and what I think is the deep mutual respect that requires all of this to be possible. Shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I want to start at the beginning in what might seem a really simple question, but when people ask you what it's like to be co-CEOs, what do you say to that?
It's probably the only relationship in my life that I have really been single-minded about working on, right? So, and by that I mean, if you think about like the familial relationships you have, or like, you know, your boyfriend girlfriend relationships that you have, like those are the ones that you kind of, they organically grow over time and you kind of learn a lot about people on the way, but there's a instant spark or the attraction or just the birth canal that means that you're all there together, right? But this is something that it's a really odd scenario because there was a reason that we came together. And then you are growing all of that after the fact. So you're growing the trust, the connectivity, the understanding of each other. So it's almost like a reverse relationship because before we started working together, we didn't work together very closely. Like we didn't know each other very well, I would say. We didn't really know how each other operated to the truest degree. We knew each other's capabilities and skill sets. But it wasn't like a long time coming. It's not something that we had been in the same team for a really long time and worked that way. But you just get something kind of, it's something that we've really worked on and been focused on because it doesn't come from that kind of instant connection or instant reason for being. And then over the time, it's gone from being quite planned and structured.
That's me.
It's gone from being planned and structured, where we had a physical plan and a code, to something that's become quite organic and trusted.
Well, it was quite black and white, wasn't it? Because I remember, it's a really good point. And I actually think the fact that we hadn't worked together so much could also be an advantage because we were building something together in a new era, coming out of COVID, the whole unknown, how are people going to be showing up, and learning how to work together. So we set out from the beginning a couple of really clear principles. And to Sian's point, I have probably had more frank, honest conversations in my relationship with Sian than I have in any romantic relationship. And that's because we always set out at the beginning that everything we do is for the success of this business, So we cannot get, and this is very Marketing Academy, Sherilyn will love this, we can't let our awkwardness get in the way of having really transparent feedback because then we're holding the agency back. So for someone like me that can sometimes feel a bit awkward having a really kind of, as British, very frank conversation, I kind of put that in front of me and thought, well, actually, I have to do this because it's for the better good of the agency, not for me. And that kind of reframed it for me. And the second principle we set out was we wrote it on the blackboard when we were in Piermont before it got taken down.
The building got taken down,
not the whiteboard.
We actually took that with us to Everly.
And it had individual responsibility, shared accountability. And kind of that vision for us was, yes, we had this planned, quite black and white way of working that probably after about 3 or 4 months we realised just wasn't sustainable. But actually what we have learned is through those kind of individual responsibilities where we do have to go off and manage clients or run separate pitches, we trust each other. Like, we trust that that person will go and do the best they can. We consult with each other along the way, more for just support and a different perspective. But it's that shared success or shared failure that we then come back to because, it's on us to deliver.
I love this. You've turned the sort of the adage of work wife up to 11.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, we were talking about this before. The two of you were, of every guest that we've had in Unfiltered, you two were the most requested in terms of this dynamic duo. There is a genuine curiosity around how you guys have become so successful at this juggle. But before I jump into the unseen magic behind why this works, you mentioned that it wasn't that you were already in each other's orbit. So how did the two of you get helicoptered into this?
I love this story. Do you want to start or shall I?
There was a park bench.
Yeah. Okay. There was no helicopter.
There was a park bench and 2 slightly overlapping 5K radiuses.
This was COVID, yeah?
In COVID.
Yeah, this was COVID. We broke the rules.
Yeah, well, no, we didn't. We went, stop it. We weren't breaking the rules. We had like this sliver of 5K overlap between our 2 homes.
What was the name of the park? Do you remember?
Oh, no, it's in Balmain.
It's in Balmain, wasn't it? Beautiful. It had sea views. And it was like the first time we'd seen really anyone at work had come together because it was so strict. And you're right, we literally went, where can we meet? There's a slither. Let's meet on this park bench. And the reason we met on a park bench is because obviously Amy had left the business and she'd been in the business for a very long time. It was huge in terms of like disruption and what was next. And Hawks was like, right, I'm on my global tour, he said, to find the next CEO. And unknown to us at the time, he had also had conversations with us, which were, kind of interested, but just sit tight for a bit because I kind of got to figure out what I'm looking for. And Sian and I, by chance, and actually through our mentoring, came together and had a conversation that went, hey, have you had this conversation? And we were like, yeah, I've had this conversation too. And we were like, but what would happen if you and I went head to head in an interview? And I said, well, you deliver all of like product and digital, and then I come from a planning and client servicing. So it kind of depends what they're looking for, but actually that doesn't make sense because if you bring it together, then you've got the unicorn that Hawks was looking for. So that's why the park bench came, because we needed somewhere to come together and continue the conversation. And we sat there with our laptops on a park bench with this wonderful view in Balmain, and we wrote a business plan proactively to do a CoCEO.
It's an awesome story.
Project Pirate.
I love that story.
Project Pirate.
Project Pirate, yeah.
But the point is more that it was coming from that kind of business perspective, right? OMD is a huge business, a very successful agency, and really long-standing, tenured clients, and going in an incredible direction. And Amy had done a huge amount of work in the lead up to kind of her next step and left the business in an incredible position. So actually it's a really daunting task to go, what do you do next? Like, you just, somebody has to come in and not break it and take it to this next stage. And that's where you go, there's a couple of different ways that you could approach that. So we're really lucky that Hawks has a history of not conforming to the same structure and same approach. So if you look at how he historically hired, and even within like OMG today, obviously there's a lot of change, but what we're really good at is testing our own conventions. Just because one role has left, it doesn't mean it needs to be the same one. You're not just plugging and playing. Like, we are constantly evolving, which is what business needs to do. So then when you actually when we took a step back and looked at what the business required, you've got a really large successful agency is going into its next era of growth, which is doing things like diversifying revenue streams. It's also adding new products into the ecosystem, but also it's trying to work through kind of transformative work streams as it relates to people as well. Because that's a huge element that changed post-COVID as well, how you engage people. That requires different capabilities, and most businesses have very traditional structures, right? You have COOs, and that was the big question, is like, should you have a CEO and a COO? Would that make more sense? Because that's the conventional way of doing things. But if you'd had a COO that's traditionally looking a bit more inside the business, we felt like it wasn't going to solve for some of the challenges that were presented to us at the time. So it was on the park bench, we were able to take a step back and go and say, what do we think the business needs, and how, and firstly was a pressure test of, could our different capabilities help solve for what was needed and next, and then what would it look like? And then we took it to Hogs, and the rest is history.
Let's start with the dynamic, the CoCEO dynamic. What are the invisible things that make this co-leadership work?
I would say the amount of conversations we have, just morning, evening, and I don't mean like it consumes. It's often support. It's often, I've got something I need to take you through. I just need to unpack it because really vulnerable conversations of, do you think I've approached this in the right way, or I may have f***ed this up. Can you tell me what you would have done differently?
I knew someone was going to drop the F-bomb. I had good money.
I'm surprised it wasn't you, actually. I am rarely a swearer.
We've had much worse on this series already.
I was expecting it to be me. So good on you. Look, here we go.
I've learned, that could be one of my things that I've learned from Sean, is how to throw the F-bomb.
Don't say that.
I was pure before. But I think that invisible lens behind, like, it's the support, but also we've both got 2 kids, yeah? Like, between us, we've got 4 young kids, all at school age. You know, you were at Easter Hat Parade this morning. I was trying to do cross country last week
Merry
in the
Easter
rain.
Hat Parade.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mine were like, we're not doing it. I was like, great. But the balance of that is really challenging, and people talk about balance and it sounds beautiful on paper, but the reality is it's quite chaotic. But then if you've got a partner, and we've got Kel, and who's our EA, so she's like our third in this in terms of support, but then also the exec team, we all just back each other and make it happen. Like, I think that's the most commonly used phrase is, we'll be good, we'll make it happen, it will be okay. Because it will, because we've all got each other's backs. And I think for you and I, it's implicit and daily.
And that's been like a learned behaviour though, because that was what we were saying before, that it had to be super structured at the beginning, because if you were, unlike a romantic relationship or that familiar relationship that I was talking about before, you're coming in not cold, but you don't know somewhat like how somebody operates, or how does somebody operate under pressure, like what's their pressure state, what's their happy state, what's their relaxed state, and so you're kind of learning and adjusting as you go, right? So the key to any relationship is being really clear about where you're going or what you're trying to achieve. So if you can set that out and be really consistent, and so we are constantly communicating in all manner. I was thinking about this earlier, like how many different manner of communication styles we have. It comes back, like those conversations are largely rambling, I would say, but it's because you're really focused on what have you got to do at any one time, right? And that's the point. So like yesterday morning I called Laura and went, holy moly, there is so much going on, and I wasn't really looking for Laura to go and prioritize and organize. I was actually using it to pressure test and be like, okay, what should I be doing more of, what should I be doing less of? And then she will be doing the same, like she'll call and do the same thing. It could be like, I had this conversation, did I approach it in the right way? And I'm like, either yes, or sometimes you go, no, like I would have done it the other way. And it's quite good because there's very few roles in an organization where you have like the benefit of being able to work with someone who can give you that feedback that's not coming from a place of ego, because or that you're trying to, like, between the two of us, we're not trying to impress each other. What we're trying to do is work together. And so in most instances, you're really clear on the intent is there to give you, like, there's positive intent behind the feedback. And so it's not there because you are not delivering on something or you've missed a deadline or whatever it is. It's coming from a good place. So actually it's probably the best type of feedback you could ever get.
I think there's a hidden genius in that, right? Because one of the things that I often hear, particularly from chief executives, is just how lonely it is at the top, that you don't have that soundboard. And if you do, it's often one or two steps removed. It's your personal board, or it's, you know, mentors that have, you know, traversed your career with you. Whereas what, you know, serendipitously or otherwise, you've got someone that is, to your point, there's no power distance, there's no ego, but there's also no power distance because you're peers. And you can rigorously pressure test thinking and ideas and really stretch them to within an inch of their life. And like, I think there's a magic in that most chief executives might not have. And there's that's sort of that 1 + 1 = 3. And I think that it's sort of the benefit of both a mentor, but also someone that fundamentally understands your business to the nth degree, like you do.
Well, the situation that you're in at that very moment.
Yeah,
the micro context.
It's the micro context. You're right, because you're right. A lot of people have a mentor, but then you've got to download your version of it. And often you skew your version of it.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes we've seen each other's version of it. And I'm like, well, actually, I saw it a bit differently to you. Yeah. And that's when the real feedback comes through. And they're like, oh, well, no, I thought I'd done X, Y, and Z. So I think that micro feedback in the moment really helps us take a step back and get better at what we're doing.
So what happens when you're starting on opposite ends of the river, right? When you disagree, and how do you find space for each other's instincts but respect the path that you might need to walk yourselves?
It's very rare that we come in at completely different ends of the spectrum. Normally because it's very rare that you're coming in cold to a scenario, right? But also remembering that we're working off the same assumed knowledge of something or the same understanding of where we've got to get to, right? Yeah. Then we were talking about it just this morning that in most instances, we disagree all the time. And it's funny because you can disagree without bickering. There's a difference. Like, we're not bickering. We're just going, I don't agree with that because I took X, Y, Z out of it, bloody blah, blah, blah. But I can't think of a time in the last 4 years where we've hit like an impasse, because what happens is normally in a scenario it goes back to that trust and that respect of somebody else. So normally it's one of us like conceding and going, okay, I can see that you're really quite like passionate, driven. You're normally really clear about who's got probably the enhanced capability to be able to like give a clear read on something or agree in a direction, because we do have different capabilities and skill sets. And then you normally go, okay, go forth and conquer. So there's very few instances where I can't think of any where we've really come up.
That's not what Laura told me.
Yeah, well, I've got a whole list. No, but I think, look, we have them in the moment, and I think as I said, we talked about this morning. It's you can tell when it really matters to the other one, and I think that's sometimes. Again, the ego thing is you have to take a step back and go, why does this matter? Or does it matter more to Sian? Because actually I can feel this is really important to her. You kind of mentally risk assess, go, okay, this is not going to be collateral damage here. And then you have to importantly go, all right, let's go with your route, but then back it. What you can't do is then sit and go, oh, I knew that wasn't going to work. Yeah. You have to back it.
There's this great, I can't remember who this quote's from, but, this idea of whoever loves it most is right.
Yeah.
Right, and that sort of philosophy of if you're the person that loves it most, we'll see. And if we learn, we learn.
Well, because normally, if you have that kind of philosophy, and that's a really nice wrapping that we'll be taking and stealing, is the sheer passion that someone brings into that scenario gives you enough momentum to make it a success.
So you plunged into this thing, and I love the park bench story. What was the thing that surprised you most once you were in the chair together?
I think for me was, we can do this. And when it got announced in market, it was exciting, but it was also really nerve-wracking. Yeah. And, there were some headlines like the only way is down. Like, we remember that quite well because that hurt. And you think, well, that's a shame, because you've got two female leaders coming together, giving it a go, being supported by the rest of our network. So let's support these people. And I feel quite passionately about that because you see a lot of kind of quite negative headlines in our trade press, especially about people. I was like, let's focus on the work. Let's back people and support them to make it work. So I think we went into it with that, and we were so determined that our time, we are taking care of this agency, and our ambition is that we leave it better than we started it. That's always how you approach these things. And that importantly, our people have an incredible experience along the way. So the first year we did our conference nationally. So as you can imagine, coming out of COVID, it was the first time we brought all states together. So we had 650 people. We had our global CEO, George Manus, flew in from the US. We had Tony Harradine, our APAC CEO. We had Charlotte come in, who's our OMD APAC CEO, obviously Hawks and our exec team. But what was so wonderful, and almost I would say the energy we needed to launch our new leadership, was to bring everyone together. We did it in SeaWorld, which is a client of ours in the Gold Coast. So just a great fun place to all come together and experience it. And we connected everyone through the ambition that we wanted to carry. We actually used the Marketing Academy for some of the speakers. So we had Kevin Carroll, who was phenomenal. He virtually dialed in from the US, and we had various other speakers as well who were just brilliant. And it was that moment where everyone had gone through so much with COVID that we needed everyone to feel inspired and excited about where they were going. So in that first year, we managed to do the conference, which wasn't an easy feat, and took the entire exec team and leadership team to make that happen. But also, we had, I think, 7 retentions that year, contractual retentions. So you've got that in the back of your head the whole time. It's like, wow, this could be quick. This could be over before it's begun.
You don't want circumstance to have the rug pulled.
Exactly.
We also had like new business wins as well. But I think to your point in the question, there was at no point were we focusing on us. It was on the success of us in a role. You then really quickly pivot. So the park bench was probably the most planning that we had done, where we sat down and figured out how would this work, what would that look like. Because as soon as you're like, you get your new fancy email signature and you're like, oh, this is a bit nice, the mental focus has to shift, because it's then about the business, right? And it's about the team that you're running. And we, like any leader running an agency or any business, you were coming out of COVID. And so it was a series of news, and maybe that helped us even more, because everybody was in this new normal. And so we were just defining and creating our own new normal again.
Are there any rubrics that you use to divide versus unify around elements of the chief role? So are there certain things that are, rigorously individualized, based on skill sets? You mentioned this earlier, Laura, but then there are certain things where it is, guys, this is something that we need to be unified and shared on.
At the beginning, it changes all the time, and it probably changes formally once a year. Okay. So once a year, is that fair?
It's kind of, we give ourselves a review of how things are going.
Yeah.
Because I think if you carry on working in a certain way, you're going to miss a trick. And I think that sort of linear version has become so organic, because the other thing, we'd both worked in the business for a long time. So I'd run the Sydney office as a co-role with Kim Hamilton, and then you'd done a national role digitally. So you had the kind of view of very much of Melbourne that I hadn't got. So we were like, well, let's use those strengths. I had clients that I had existing relationships, as did Sian. So you don't want to disrupt everything. So we kind of kept the continuity. And so whilst we know each other's clients pretty well, and more so socially, we're in our own clients, and that's quite separate, because what we don't want is for a client to have 2 CEOs sat in a room, because that's inefficient. So we're very specific about clients, I would say. And then I'd say more the product is the thing that's evolved more and more, because product is an area that we have led from an industry perspective, and we have got such incredible capability that Sian has been absolutely core to building through her digital role into the CEO role. But then it's, well, what do clients need? Because that then informs what we need to develop in product. And then how do I take that product and be able to talk about it really clearly to our clients and articulate it in a way that gives them that true benefit, and then take the whole agency on the journey. So that's probably the area that's been most organic, and for the right reason.
It seems very capability led. So if there is a really clear demarcation, then you know what, we don't need to
I think that's changed massively over time, because at the beginning it was so capability led. It was red and white, because that was the colour of our business plan at the time. It was all red and white, and this is who's doing what and how that's going to go. But then I remember 18 months ago, I was like, look, I've led big teams before, and I hadn't run a market, so I was like, let me at this. Let me have a go at doing this. Yeah. And then we reorientated again. And it's actually quite nice, because then it gives you growth potential in your own role. Still, right?
Exactly where I was going to go. Like, how do you balance leaning on strengths versus giving each other an opportunity to really grow?
Exactly. So in that instance, then we reorientated again. So that's what I was saying. It's almost got to the point. The joke is, it's like you do your business plan at the beginning of every year, but then at the same time, then we pressure test and go, actually, what does this look like? And it has become far more organic. But the problem is you don't want it to be so organic that you then have a team of people within our exec team who are trying to figure out who the hell they go to. Yeah. So you need to have some structure in that.
To that point, having trodden the path thus far, were there any other stings in the tail, those sort of unforeseen things where you're like, we've got to be careful not to trip that tripwire?
There is an element that you need to make sure that you're really clear that it's not just two people running an agency. We have a whole exec team. And so I think the biggest risk you could have is you have an insular leadership model. So you can imagine that if we're focused on Laura and I, and then we're not communicating to this incredible executive team that we work with every single day, then we failed, right? Because then you're trying to hold everything within two people. So instead, what we're trying to do is say, okay, well, there's actually 12 of us in this community. Our job is just to try and help set the direction and then corral. And then
it's a brilliant point. It's sort of the dark side of that magic that you get in having a partner to walk alongside you, is that you can become inwardly focused unintentionally,
and so so that's the point. So you have to make sure that the tripwire could have been that you then just becomes a two-person show. And I think you also have to be really careful that the tripwire would be, again, if you make this all about us. And so, like, for the first year in our roles, we did no profile. We were not focusing on trying to become, the duo,
show ponies.
I was like, what was it? Like the glittery unicorns of the media land. That wasn't the job. That wasn't the focus. The focus was the agency. We looked like we did some repositioning work. We tried to make sure that the people were. It was very clear that the people were at the focus of everything that we do, and then we're focusing on how we evolve. But then over time, that focus has changed. But if the tripwire would have been if we made it about us, and if you made it about being insular and thinking that there was only two in the team, then that would have really
alienated, I think. And I think the other thing we've had, if we look at our exec team, we've had so much growth within it. So we've had Kim Hamilton move out of her co-MD role into the OMG, now Chief Marketing Officer role, and is absolutely smashing it. We recently announced Morel moving into the OMG Chief Investment Officer role, or Client Partnerships role. So actually what we've been able to do is bring this team together, but continue growing them and making sure that they have opportunity. And whilst we don't really want them to leave Red, because we love working with them in OMD. We would never get in the way of that, because we can see the impact that they're going to have at a group level, and then it frees up opportunity for us to bring other people in within our leadership team. So actually we have that exec team, but I'd also call out how we've, I think over time, really been able to bring our national leadership team in of all the markets in the same way. And I think about profile, like we're actually, when you're running a client like Telstra, for example, it's like a mini agency in itself. There's 55 people in that. And so how do we profile Helen, who runs Telstra, who's an incredible partner to the Telstra client team, in a way that really raises the profile of the agency as well? It can't just be Sian and I show ponying every time, because actually we're often, in that situation, not the best person to be there. There's someone who knows that business so well and has a different perspective, and that's what we really embrace and also really enjoy hearing.
Do you look for the same things in your leaders?
Not at all.
Oh.
No.
Okay.
No. I love the variety we have in our team, and we're not so different that we're going to blow everything up every 5 minutes, because that's just not going to be useful. But I think we purposely think about how we bring people from different backgrounds, how they have different perspectives. We've just brought Rachel Page in from, X7 Yahoo in to run OMD Melbourne. I think that's a really good example. She ran an agency 25 years ago. Now, Rachel's going to come in with a different perspective on growth. That's great, because actually we'd really value her perspective. And I brought her into meetings, and afterwards I said, how would you have done that differently? Like, how would you have, would you have even had that meeting? Like, what would you do? Like, challenge us. And I think by bringing those different perspectives and those different leadership styles in, that's how we're all learning and growing and actually getting to a better outcome as a business.
Yeah, you've got to think about this as the biggest fail of leadership is you end up with a committee. Right? That does nothing. It's a one-way, transactional, pointless scenario, because everyone's been on a rubbish committee, haven't they? Like, when you're all there staring at the ceiling going, what is life? Why am I here? If you have a leadership team that is humming, you're actually celebrating a diversified skill sets, but also mindsets, but also backgrounds. And it is really hard to put together a really cohesive leadership team. Sometimes you actually don't want the cohesion, because sometimes you actually it's not having you want healthy tension in the community, or because you're actually sometimes that ends up being quite a motivator. Yeah. But what is consistent about everyone that's in the team, the consistency is the fact that you want people who are passionate. Because fundamentally, like, they're just jobs at the end of the day, right? And everyone's had a rubbish job at some point. And you know that if you're thinking about this as a job, then we've lost. You shouldn't feel like you're working every single day, because everybody has to do a lot. Everyone's busy. Everyone's got ridiculous tasks. And if you feel like you're working, it's going to be really, really hard. Instead, if you bring together a really passionate group of people, you don't feel like you're working. You feel like you're actually spending some enjoyable time together, or doing something that's actually going to make you feel quite fulfilled at the end of the day. That's the kind of community and cohort that you're looking to try and create, which is quite hard, because with each change that you make, and we've had a lot of really positive change and evolution, it's really hard to go and try and find the next person in the puzzle that's going to add positivity to that community and work as a team, versus the worst place, and my biggest fear is always that it turns into a committee.
I think also we've got 3 very different states. And so what we embrace is, with Ali, Rachel and Amanda running Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, you actually want the leadership to be different. We don't want to have a vanilla view across nationally. Yeah, we want to have a shared ambition and clear vision of where we're going, but how they then bring that to life culturally and through people experience is actually really important, and is a big focus for us, because I think we came out of COVID and we looked at it as the borderless agency and how technology enabled us to connect. And I think functionally, yes, that's brilliant. But I turn up in Brisbane and it feels different. I turn up in Melbourne, it feels different, and Sydney. And I think we don't want to lose that specialness, because that makes people feel part of something that's incredibly differentiated, but also right for their client base as well, and right for the people that live there. So I think from that, we've thought very much about who are the right leaders in those markets.
You mentioned something that I think is a really interesting point. I'd like to pull on that thread around giving a bit of variability in culture by geography or by office. I'd love to understand your philosophy on that, because I hear, both sides of the coin, and I'm not going to yet divulge where I sit on this spectrum, but between sort of the need for a unified culture across the organisation, and a shared North Star, and that permeates into every dimension of the culture, versus the benefits and costs of not microcultures but subcultures that are cloth cut to fit for different teams and territories. I'd love to get your perspective on.
We've been on a journey,
okay.
As Laura's just said. Like, coming out of COVID, you needed it to be unified, right? Because there was so during that COVID, kind of that couple of years of COVID, we had people who had switched geographies. You had remote working, you had remote workers, you had new structures, you had some people living in Brisbane who were actually working in Sydney. It was like, you know, like we
there are still lingering impacts of this.
Oh,
yeah, like, but you kind of, I always got to, you basically put it in a jar, shaking it aggressively, and then you were like going, okay, what have we been left with? So your culture was going to be more unified and consistent nationally because it was like one national team. However, things have started to change again, right? So you can't, if you were trying to have a homogenized culture across all three markets that we have, you'd fail. Because what is actually going back to the point around passion and not feeling like you're actually working, it's more than just a job. You've got three distinct cultures based on, you know, the three distinct geographies that should be celebrated, because I think we haven't always got this right. So we have a brief into each of the markets at the moment, which is, okay, our focus this year is about team engagement, right? And that's not saying that there's disengagement, as in people don't want to do what they want to do. But what we have at the moment is we have you have a lot of incredible engagement in individual teams. Our teams within our different geographies are quite big. So we have like a couple of the government businesses, and they're teams of 70, right? So they are big pieces of business. They are small businesses in themselves. So they have their own distinct culture and their own distinct team engagement. Our job is then to connect them with the broader OMD business, because there are benefits of them, but like they're not a satellite, they are part of a broader culture and a broader collective. But the reason that we're focusing on it very much at a market by market level is because there's the proximity. So you want them to feel empowered to be able to create their own culture, their own codes, because I mean there's also everyone's deep love of competition. As soon as you do like states off, everything happens quite quickly. But it becomes more personable. Like we are in a business, we are in a people orientated organization. By that I mean the output of our people is our product, right? Yeah. Service-based industry. And if you were trying to make that too corporate and too generic and too homogenized, then you're going to lose the very essence of what I think makes our business incredible, which is the unique talent.
Yeah. How do you balance, because the word that comes to mind is intimacy, right? Like the intimacy of that culture, particularly in a business as big as OMD, with what would be your shared intention as the chiefs, right? That there's got to be, you know, I assume, an intention, to your point. The intention this year is team engagement, and there's a shared belief on what that looks like, but how that manifests. And, you know, it sounds like a pretty interesting juggling act to trade off what is unified intention versus where that sort of the creation of intimacy is sometimes at odds with that.
I think it's quite straightforward, because I think we've got so much data now that we can understand the reasons for staff engagement, like what's going to improve things, what are the challenges that the teams are feeling. So we can look at that nationally, and often we go, yeah, there's these 1, 2, 3 things that we need to nationally address. Yep. Sometimes that's at an OMD level, sometimes that's at an OMG level, and sometimes it's global. Yep. Then we go into the different markets and we go, and here's a nuance that we need to look at for Brisbane that doesn't really matter for the team in Melbourne, and actually for Sydney they're really going to focus on this. So I think as long as you've got your clear direction of where we're going, and we've got this whole new positioning around We Create What's Next, which is a really good example, because we've got a global new positioning that we've launched. We're now locally doing immersions in each market. We're going to have one brief that the teams are going to work through on those immersion days. Yep. But I reckon they're going to come out with different ideas, different outputs, and that I think is brilliant. Like, I want to celebrate that. What we'd like to do is come together again and share that nationally, so people can learn from other markets, or maybe just hear it and go, that's great. Like, that's not for me, that doesn't work for us, but I love that they're doing it. So I think it's that kind of, we go national, we go into our markets, and then we bring it back together.
But I think
it's empowerment.
But on your very last word, it's empowerment, because if we were trying to like, so there's two things. We've been on this bit of a journey recently about the difference between culture and engagement, and there's quite a distinct difference between the two. The culture is like the people, the vibe, the buzz about why you would, like, they're almost like your reason for coming to work and enjoying what you do. Engagement is your engagement with the business, like that connection about why you stay, right? If we were trying to, as a late 30-something, trying to create something for me, that would look, Laura, that would look very different from the majority of the people in our business. So if we were trying to create the ultimate team culture or the ultimate team engagement for us, and we were trying to dictate what that looked like, that would be a massive fail, because that is not going to fly with the majority of OMDs in our building. They would probably look at it and be like, holy there you go. This is not a type of business that I want to work with within. Like, if we were we were directing what it had to look like, that would be a fail. Instead, we have this incredible cohort of leaders in the business who are working really closely with their teams every single day, who understand what they need, how they are most motivated, what drives their passion. They are the beacons of what this should look like, and we need to empower those people to do that, because we're not trying to write a culture and engagement strategy for ourselves, we're trying to write it for them.
And we've proactively created structures to do that. So we're in our third year now of Exec Next. So the makeup of them, there's 7 of them across Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane, and they're probably about account director level, so 5+ years. We do a bit like TMA. We do a recruitment, not as vigorous as the TMA, but we do a recruitment process where they're interviewed by the exec team, and in their cohort we give them business challenges. We invite them to the exec meetings, and they often are quite surprised at how open and honest we are and just really raw with what's going on. And we do mentoring. So we've kind of emulated a bit of a TMA in a mini version. And I think the Exec Next team are always like fascinating to hear to, because we'll talk to them about culture and engagement. Well, they'll just sit there and challenge us and go, why are you thinking X, Y, and Z? And we're like, because we're all of a similar profile. A lot of us have got kids and we have different requirements and expectations, which is why we bring them in to challenge us. And I think the Exec Next program that we've done like this year is already like, we've listened to their feedback and they've challenged us on just the program, and we're like, we need more of this from you, and how can we do this better?
This
and
is where you got it wrong. Why are we here?
But the fact that they can sit there and tell their exec team that we got it wrong, I think shows the transparency that we have and the empowerment. Then they do it in the politest way, but they do it with respect in a constructive way. But ultimately, they're there to get a better outcome as well, because they're a passionate group of people, and they've also connected across states. And that's one of the best things that comes out of the program for them, is connectivity.
I love the balance. I think that even in principle that you guys are drawing between an empowered, almost a decentralized harnessing of the wisdom at all levels, because it's so easy, I think, in big corporates to just try to dictate from the top, and this fixation on consistency, when in reality, to your point, Sian, it's an organism. A company is a tapestry of humans, right? And I think it's got to be much more fluid than that. I think there's a lot of wisdom to take from that.
And I just want to be really clear. I don't think we're crushing it, because in terms of there are always times where that you're not getting it right. But there's also times that you've really shown a lot of progress, right? So that was always, when we went into this model, our model was all about trying to make sure that we were empowering. And then we do get all of these metrics, the data, which we love, which actually show you where you aren't getting it right, and that you can adjust, because the intent is there. Yeah. But then if you are not willing to take on board the feedback from each other, the team, the broader agency, to adjust, then I think I was just sat here thinking about how many times we've written different communication codes and hierarchies and structures, just because there's a piece of feedback that we get all the time in staff surveys around whether they feel like they're getting the honesty or the transparency from the leadership team. And I reckon every year we've tried a different approach, and even in a course of a year we'll keep trying, because the change is consistent and constant, but also how people are feeling is really changing quite significantly. I don't think I mean, we've all enjoyed long careers, but I don't think I've felt such a period of heightened change as we've felt in the last 3 or 4 years. And people's needs are changing a lot more. And so I think, though, what hasn't changed is our ambition state. But I think what is changing is how much we are having to constantly change to be sure that we keep up and that we're delivering on what we're trying to set out to do.
I think it's very similar to medicine, right? You've got remedial medicine when something goes really wrong and you've got to rectify, versus preventative medicine. And I think, we shouldn't have to justify that we're working on culture. Culture's a constant work on, engagement and motivation is a constant work on, and what motivated us 5 years ago, to your point, is really different. And I guarantee you 2 years from now, given the way that things are going with, non-human enablement and, the 2-letter algorithm that is bandied around too often, it's going to change even more so. And that, that overused cliche of, the rate of change just only gets faster, just means that it's sort of it's the always on thing. And, to your point, God forbid we should have gotten it wrong, and to come back to what you were both saying, ego gets in the way and go, well, we came out 12 months ago and said this was that we don't want to seem erratic. It's not erratic. It's fluid and constantly evolving, much like the people that underpin those cultures.
It's a good point, because I think also the not getting it right all the time has been something that has been consistent the whole time I've worked at OMD, in a good way, because let me put a frame around this.
Quick.
Because I've always felt that I have had permission to give it a go. I've always had the backing of the business. And I actually think about the time when I came in and ran Telstra many, many years ago, and I'd never done telco before. I got asked to go and do it. It was a promotion at the time, but also we need to keep the business. And I was like, why are you asking me? Like, I've just come from McDonald's as an account director into a business director. And I think that was the biggest demonstration of having the support and the backing. I had Lee and Hawks and Mark there at the time, and Amy, that it didn't matter if I made a mistake, because it was about the passion, it was about having a clear vision, and it was about giving it a go. And one of our values is own it. And actually, I think that's a really important one, because I want the whole agency, and they do feel that if they own it and they give it a go and it doesn't go right, as long as you don't keep repeating the same mistakes, how is that learning mindset helping us progress? And maybe I take it for granted that we have that within the agency and everyone else has it. I don't know. But that feels just so complicit with how I show up and how the whole business behaves as well.
I think you touch on something that certainly in this series, but more and more I hear from leaders, is this sort of intersection between sort of humanity and leadership, and us as leaders being in the business of just our people being well, right? If you think about the pie chart of your time, 10 years ago versus now versus where I think it's going, fundamentally we are going to be in the business of our people's well-being more and more. That's going to take more of our energy. What's one thing, to that point of really human-led leadership, what's one thing that you found really hard in making this transition into a shared role that on reflection, you probably didn't anticipate?
Both coming from roles that require a lot of stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement, I think what I personally found hard, and Laura might have a different one, is the fact that you're used to being really clear on, firstly, neither of us had done a CEO role before, and we were both tapping into new skill sets, new kind of, and there's no job description, or maybe there was, we just didn't.
I thought you wrote it on the park bench.
we did, but
we left it on the park bench.
No, we still got it, but that wasn't really a JD. That was more like a task
business
to ourselves
plan.
that this is what was going to happen, right? So I think that is the hardest part, was the fact that it was that instilling those new behaviours of how you work, right? Because I was in the Chief Digital Officer role, I was running a national team, and I was having to operate in a really distinct way with the team I had at the time. And then you're suddenly taken out, and it was like overnight, and working in a completely new way and completely new behaviour, and having to work with someone that you knew but not really intimately knew, right?
The complexity of forming and norming.
And exactly. But
and storming.
Yeah. And then conforming. But it's what was hard in that is that you are doing and learning quite at the same time. And as I said before, you don't have the privilege of thinking about you two establishing yourselves in a role. You're so focused on the task at the same time. So it was almost like you had 3 jobs in one. And that's what I personally found hard, because you're trying to engage with new stakeholders in a new way. Like, I am used to running at things, running hard, and then taking a team.
That is Sean's favourite expression.
You shook the whole snow globe.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't change everything all at once.
No.
The one rule, don't change everything.
But then you have to just figure out these new things. And that was hard, because you're trying to, like, unlearn your own behaviours, right? And it's a great part of growth, but it's also a hard part of growth.
And I think for me, look, humans are complex. Yeah, it's interesting because we talk about how we understand audiences. We don't even understand ourselves. Yeah, like, I don't know who I am. Like, I'm still figuring it out. Yeah. Changes all the time as you get older and you go through different experiences. Yeah, so when you're trying to figure out someone else in such a close partnership, often under pressure, I think that's the biggest challenge. And I think that's become something that we've become so much better at, because it's not like we sit there and we go, my whole value system is X and I behave like this under stress and pressure, because often we're kind of aware, but we often don't want to admit some of those behaviours. And I think what Sian and I have done is we've observed that in each other, and we've kind of pulled that apart in a way that we understand, so that when I can see, like, I affectionately call Sian, the whirlwind. She comes in and she's like, she's there before you've seen her. And that's great. She comes with impact and she's usually making shit happen. And I'm probably I'd take a step back, and I'm probably like more considered, and that probably frustrates her sometimes because she's in her whirlwind and we're like, go, go, go. So I think we've learned to kind of almost find the rhythm of each other, and then find the benefit of the whirlwind and the benefit of the person that takes a step back and looks at things differently. Because actually, when you bring those two things together, it becomes really powerful. But I think it's back to that invisible part. That invisible part of humans is really actually fascinating. And it's not just Sian and I, it's also our exec teams.
Yeah,
like, how we lead people is so different, and how we don't just do a one size fits all. There's, I sat down with Amanda yesterday, and we ended up laughing because she came in, she had so much going on. She went, for my own well-being, I've just written down all the things that I just do every week. And I said, okay, take me through them. So she went through them all, and she was like, and I said, okay, well, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And she was like, no, I've got to do that. I said, okay. I said, what would you like me to do to support you? She went, oh, no, I just want you to acknowledge that I have all these things. And I said, okay, I acknowledge them. Would you like me to help you? She went, no, not at all. I just literally want you to acknowledge it. And I was like, we sat there and we laughed, because it is just where we are right now. There is so much going on, and sometimes people don't want to be fixed and solved and given an answer.
They just want to be heard.
They just want to be heard, and that's probably most of us. And I think we go into this rescue mentality, and often it's just sit there and listen. So, yeah, horses for courses.
What's one thing that you're proud of in each other that you don't say enough out loud?
I'm proud of Sian's tenacity and how she is never afraid. If she thinks it's the right thing to do, however daunting the process to get there is, whether it's having an important conversation with someone and it's a, confronting conversation, she'll do it because it's the right thing to do.
Laura has this incredible curiosity. And normally where you start a conversation and where you end a conversation or a project is completely two different places. But the journey, so just sitting back and listening to Laura, how Laura's unpicked something and then dug into it and tried to find a little bit more, is firstly a fascinating process. I learn so much every single day by just listening. But yeah, it's this has been the constant. So Laura is an inherently curious person, and I think it leads to incredible things. Because you just never know what you're going to on the journey.
My dad used to say I was nosy, but now we rebranded it curious.
Curiosity.
Yeah. And if someone's listening in and wants to find this magic in their prime of career, what's the one thing they need to know stepping into this? Into
a co-role. Look, I do think it is about finding the right person. I think we have come to this with probably some very common shared values. The ego thing could totally get in the way. Like, if you are looking at this as your own personal success, it's not really going to work.
Yeah.
if you look at it collectively, hence why we came up with the ambition of the shared accountability, you know, if there's a success that Sian is responsible for, we celebrate that. If there's something that goes wrong that I've done, we come together and we solve for that. There's no blame. There's no you should have done this. I think that ego removing and having that common ground and ambition is...
That's quite hard to do.
Yeah, it sounds great on paper, doesn't it?
It's really hard because you have to keep that in check, because everything is fair and equal. From your remuneration structure to the dollar, it's exactly the same. And that, you know, we have really transparent conversations about our own growth and what does that look like. But it is always hard because ego is a natural part of everyone's human thing. So it's quite good. So then every so often, we have different sounding boards that we both have, and you go and be like, did I come at that a little bit all about me?
Yeah.
And that's good to have as well, because you have to sense check that and pressure test it. But the other thing I'd say is that the co-roles aren't right for every moment. I think we just found the right moment and the right time. I don't know. I think Amy did an incredible job running OMD for as long as she did and put it in a really good place. But the size of the task to do when we stepped into this role, it would have been an absolute mammoth effort for anyone, because there would have been these two pieces that need to be done. There's the growth of the business as well as the stability and the evolution of the team. And that is a lot for anyone in the size of the organisation that we run. And as I went back to before, you could have looked at a CEO and a COO role, and actually that was a lot of what I think Hawkes' pressure back was getting, was that it should probably be that. But there was a very real reason why it needed to be two CEOs and not a job share, not a CEO and a COO structure. And it won't last forever, but right now, for the time and the business that you need to find the right structure for the business to deliver the business outcome that you're trying to drive. And that's why you should never try and create structures for people. And we didn't do that. We went and saw a business problem that could be fixed by a structure and approach, and luckily for us, we had the capability and skill sets to deliver that. But even if it wasn't Laura and I still think, and we work in a business that has had and will continue to have a lot of dual leadership roles. That's just been the OMG way, which we've been pretty privileged to do.
I think there's a profound level of humility in that answer that I deeply respect. And the other thing that's coming through is really also the radical forgiveness from both of you. There's trust is one thing. It's easy. We trust each other. You know, there's mutual respect, but there's just this undercurrent of, and if we get it wrong, there's just absolutely there's forgiveness. And I think that the other side of ego is you've got to be able to forgive, otherwise ego rears its ugly head again.
That comes with knowing people's intent.
Yeah.
If you come into something assuming the worst, or assuming that someone's coming up with poor intent, then you're going to fail, and you're going to spend a whole heap of time trying to psychoanalyze what the hell is going on, right?
Yeah. I
implicitly know that if Laura's having a conversation with me about something I stuffed up or I could have done better, it's coming from a place of good intent. And I think it's not very often that you can say that, let's be honest, because there is a lot of politics in organisations and the businesses we work with and the market and blah, 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 blah. But I think it's very rare that you work in a structure where you implicitly know that there is good intent behind what is being said.
I think that is very well said. All right, we are towards the end of our merry journey, ladies. And we're going to finish with a tradition on this series, which is the big 3+1. I'm going to ask you 3 questions. I'm going to alternate who gets to go first. And then there's a +1 at the end. Laura, what is the single most important question we should be asking ourselves?
Okay, I personally believe it's, are we happy? And it's interesting because I happened to see another podcast, I think, that happened this week with Sherilyn, who said the exact same thing. So this was also my belief, and then maybe it comes from doing the Marketing Academy, but I truly believe work is something that we are so passionate about, but it's also stressful, yeah? How many days do you come out?
Second F-bomb.
How do you stop marking me off? How many days do you come out and you go, whoa, I've got nothing left?
Yeah.
Like that was a tough day. But I also believe that if you finish the end of the week better than you started it, that's also a positive. I think we need to acknowledge more the moments where we've actually had success and celebrate those and not just move on to the next thing. But I think that happiness for me is so important because I just think we give so much, we sacrifice so much. One of the things we're both really very focused on is not missing out on school sports days, not missing out on Mother's Day. We've
Easter hat parades.
Easter hat parade. You had
was
crazy
a
hair
work of
day
art.
yesterday.
I can't wait to see this.
That has to be a priority. And sometimes we can't, you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're travelling and it's just not going to work out. And they're the moments where you have to really question, is this worth it?
Yeah.
Is this making me happy that I'm going to miss my son's XYZ? So I think that for me is the most important thing that I come back to. And I probably ask myself that every week.
Yeah.
Every single week.
That's the right question. You never want to stop asking that question. I
No,
think.
but I think sometimes people do. They get caught up in the kind of just the way of doing things and forget the big questions, which sometimes you've got to take yourself out of the office, go for a walk and get some headspace.
Sian, what's the single most important question we should be asking ourselves?
It's very similar to it's the why. Why are you doing something? Like, you are, like, nobody owns your IP or your, like, nobody owns you as individuals. You rent yourself to your organisation that you work for, right? You've got to be really clear about the why. Why do you let that happen, right? Because I think if you're not really clear with yourself why you're doing something, you then start getting to a place where you can be quite unhappy, but also you're really unclear about what you're trying to get out of a scenario. Like, there is a difference between having a job and having a career. Like, having a job is, I always think about it as a moment in time. It's, you know, you're in, you're out. It's a little bit more transactional. A career is something you nurture, you foster, you develop, and you're really clear about what you want to get out to and why you're doing something. And I feel like I've always been better when I'm thinking about my why and what my motivator is. And that does change over time, right? And that 100% changes over time, and that's okay. But I think if you're just thinking about that very moment, like, you're just making it really hard for yourself. And I think you then can become really unhappy as well if you're not really clear about why you're doing something and what it all adds up to.
I think it's a good asterisk to add. You know, we get caught up in the finality of those questions. It's like, no, people can change. It's, why am I doing it now?
Yeah, and it will change all the time. Like, is it because, you know, you're doing something to work towards being able to have more time at home with your kids or your family, to give yourself the time to go off traveling and do that, like, or is it that you're working up to this big ultimate goal? Like, I think it's really good to have the why, because I think earlier on in my career, it was always focused on the what. It was always focused on the what do I want to achieve. Well, I wanted to be the youngest account manager, then the account director, and then, like, work up the ladder that way. Yeah, it was always about the what. But I think as soon as you start asking the why, it becomes so much more powerful, and you actually then start growing with purpose.
Sian, I might stay with you. What's the most important thing to let go of?
Well, I think we've touched on it. It's like this ego and like, you need a healthy amount of ego to back yourself into doing something, to motivate you to do something, to make you brave, right? Yeah. But then you also have to let go of, like, ego in certain situations, especially when you are trying to think about, like, especially in a partnership structure, about how you deliver together. Because it could be, so there's two of us in this working relationship, and obviously the broader team as well, but it could quite easily become four if you're talking about Laura and I and both of our egos, and that becomes a really noisy, crowded room and a really noisy way.
I don't want to meet that.
Far out. That would be like a drinking quadruple that we never should have. But, like, I think then you need to learn to be able to let go of the ego in really unhelpful situations, because it really is the only thing that is going to get in the way of progress. And I think we've spoken about the fact that we are so orientated around the task at hand, and the task and the thing that we have been given stewardship of is this incredible business and these incredible people, and we're really single-minded in the job that we have to do. And if we let ourselves get in the way of that and our egos, then I think that would be a massive fail.
Laura?
So for me, it would be perfectionism.
Okay.
So even turning up today with no preparation put me in a complete spin this morning, because I like to be really prepared. I'm very organised. That's always been my way. I'm a Capricorn, so I'm like super tight with things like that. And I think what I've learned, especially the last couple of years, is actually progress over perfection. We've been saying it a lot this year. There's so much more to be done. We're not going to get everything right. It's not all going to be perfect. And actually, it's much more about empowerment and letting other people have a go. So actually, I'm getting much more comfortable with that, which is really quite different for me. And I'm actually kind of enjoying it as well, which I think is a really good thing, because I didn't think I would. So I've actually enjoyed today. Awesome. In fact, I've not prepared. I've actually just enjoyed having a conversation, and you're probably more genuine and authentic because of it than if you go in super prepared and you're kind of keeping to a script, you know? And I'm not just talking about doing public speaking. I'm just talking about how you show up. Yeah. How you show up with people in the hallway, have a conversation. Like, don't overthink it. Yeah. You know? I love that part of our business.
Just a massive aside. That is... The Laura 4 years ago would never have done that. Like,
a moment of real pride.
But it really, like, I remember, I was thinking back to the first podcast we did when we were told the only way was down, and like we were given the questions ahead of time, and there was like this, which you've already said, that I'm a bit of a whirlwind, and I just like, I don't like to prepare. I'm sorry. Like, I know what I've got to deliver, and I feel like I'm at my best and most confident when I just let go, because you inherently know the subject matter. And then it's funny, because when working with Laura, knowing that she likes to be prepared and structured, that can be like oil and water. But I specifically remember this podcast and being really clear about, this was the answer. You say this, this is it. And I was like, holy dooly, I don't know if I could. And that put me into...
you off your game.
Well, she goes off script anyway, so
that put me into like an anxiety, But then it's incredible to watch, because like that has massively changed over the last 4 years, and I think there are so many benefits that have come from that evolution. And it's not the fact that being prepared is a bad thing, because I know that I need a lot more preparation in my life, but it is just a real mark of how much you've evolved in that period, which has been incredible to see.
Yeah, and I think preparation is a bit like stress. There's this sort of peak. It's not, and then you get diminishing returns, and then you get reductive effects, and you can be over prepared, and then you start to come across as synthetic, and it's not magnetic. Laura, I'm going to stay with you for the last of the three. What is a life well lived?
That is the holy grail, isn't it? And I think this comes back to where you feel in that moment as well. I want to feel that a moment well lived is that whilst I love what I do in my career, not to the detriment of my family. That's super important. And my family are in the UK as well. So, speaking to my family is not as easy as if they're down the road or live nearby. You have to make that extra effort and connect in with people. And I think my friends as well become a really important part of that. My support network that exists to support me and the kids as well is truly important. So a life well lived is being able to have those experiences, but not feel that you're, say, on holiday with your kids or just going to the pub with your kids, but you're still in the mind of work, because then you're not truly enjoying the moment. Yeah. And I think that's probably something I've got much better at, is when I'm in that moment, when I'm at soccer tomorrow morning or netball tonight, sports weekends never let you have a minute to do anything else.
Uber mum.
But you are Uber mum, and you want to be there, not kind of somewhere else. I think as soon as I start feeling that I'm not actually enjoying that moment, that's not a life well lived. So that's very much in the moment right now.
That answer. It's a great answer. Sian, what is a life well lived?
It's just one where you're really clear about, firstly, it's properly living. And again, it's when you're happy and motivated in what you're doing, and you're looking back. I don't want to be known for my career. I don't want to be known for accolades. I want to be known for just having made a good impact on the people around me. And I think for that means it's like living with purpose, and I am choosing to spend my time doing this with these people, and I am enjoying it, and I'm hopefully having a positive impact on those people around me. But that for me is a life well lived, when you're leaving some positivity on those around you.
Well, thank you for choosing to come and spend time with us.
Thank you for having us.
What is the one question I should have asked you both but didn't? Sian?
You've asked us a lot. I can't even remember what you've...
It's all a blur.
It's all a blur. Have you got an answer yet?
Yeah, I guess you haven't asked us what's next. And I'm asking that question because I don't know the answer. Which again is brave, because normally I have a very planned answer to this. I don't know, and I think I find that exciting as well, because at the moment we have such a clear ambition of what we want to do for the next year or two within OMD, and I think, as we said, there's going to be so much change this year. We all know the headlines, what's coming up. So actually, I think I've just got to a point where I want to enjoy it. I want to have a really open mind to what's coming and being open to opportunities, but I think seeing our people grow, as we said, we use Kim and Morel as examples, and moving into different roles, but also seeing like we're so close to them and we bring our people into our homes, like literally. Like we know so much about each other, that we know about our kids and our relationships and what's happening. And I think seeing those people thrive is what keeps me coming back. So I'm kind of like, I don't have this big 5-year ambition. I know a lot of people do. It's just never been my thing. I'm kind of open to change.
What should I have asked you, Sian?
If we were BFFs. Like, because it's a really interesting conversation, and I don't think we've ever had it, like, because there's a difference between, like, you look at some co-structures and it's like two founders that have created a business together that have been mates since
All marriages,
right? Yeah. And I'd say that it's I'd say I am so close to Laura, and I know so much about her. I can tell, like, she walks into a room, I can tell you how she's feeling, what's going on in her head.
Heart on the sleeve.
Has she had a good day, bad day? And that's even just by looking at, like, you can just know, you implicitly know someone that you work that closely with, and even by the tone of the voice, and like, and it's really interesting. But then we spend time together socially, but not a huge amount of time outside of that either. And I think that there's something special in that too, because we are really focused on how we work together. But what I'm really clear on is Laura's going to be in my life forever now. That won't change, because this structure will evolve, and one day the co will come to an end, or it will go somewhere else, or whatever that looks like. But that will evolve. But right now we have such a focused working relationship that I wouldn't call it a BFF. I'd call it's a co. It's a partnership, right? But it's funny that it will naturally become a friendship over time as this partnership changes and evolves. But there's a difference between a friendship and a partnership, and I think that's a really special thing to